Yeah, I can't see if I'm in the right frame or anything. Oh, okay. I'm Arlie Montalvo, president of the Riverside San Bernardino chapter of the California Native Plant Society. And today I'd like to welcome you to our third Saturday program of the month. We'll also have a little bit of a general meeting at the very beginning right now. And there are some people filtering in, so we'll give them some time to sign in and get settled. So I just want to remind you that the California Native Plant Society is an organization of over 13,000 members, and we have chapters distributed through California and one in Baja California, in Northern Baja California. And we welcome you to join us. If you're not a member, it's really easy to join. If you just go to cmps.org, there's a join button up at the upper right-hand side. And then if you come to our events, for example, we have an event scheduled for Saturday, the 29th of March. It's our Spring Garden Ramble that's coming up. And it's been out on our social media. You can find it on Facebook, on Instagram. It's coming out in local papers. Today there was an article in the Press Enterprise about the Garden Ramble, and the links actually work. You need to sign up for that Garden Ramble. Everybody that attends needs to sign up. There are 4 yards that will be displayed in the Redlands area in the morning between 9 and noon. And then in the afternoon in Riverside, Western Moreno Valley, there are another 4 gardens for the afternoon part of the event. So I hope many of you can join us. Like I said, you can go online at the bit.ly link and reserve your tickets. They're free. The tickets are free, and it should be a really cool event. We have, just to let you know what we have coming up. Coming up, we have, besides the March 29th Saturday, don't forget that one, on April 19th Saturday, we have a program that will be here at 10 o'clock. And that's The End of the Lawn as We Know It by Denise Mitchell. And then on May 17th, we're changing the time to 11 a.m. That's because Nick is going to be flying down from the Sacramento area, and his plane doesn't arrive until 9. So we've shifted that May 17th program to 11. And on that program, we're going to hear from Nick Jensen, who's our staff conservation director. He's going to be talking about the wonderful tools that we have available through CMPS to support conservation. And then he will also be talking about the wonderful wildflower book that he and other people from CMPS and outside put together. It's just a great wildflower book. And then on June 21st, Saturday, at 10 o'clock, we'll be in the mountains. We'll be in the San Bernardino Mountains at Sky Park Peaks Arboretum for our meeting. That will be in person only. And it will be a tour of a restoration area. Gina Richmond is going to be leading that program. We'll have a great tour, and then we'll have a picnic. So sort of a social and picnic. And then if anybody wants to go hiking after that, we can do that. So it should be a lot of fun that day. And we almost ready? I think we are ready. Yeah. Okay, so today, those of you who are in the room can see that I'm wearing a t-shirt that's, I don't know if you can see it online because I can't see myself, but it's a San Gabriel Mountains chapter CMPS t-shirt, and I'm wearing it in honor of Gabby and Cliff McLean, who will be giving our program today. Gabby and Cliff are longtime CMPS members. They've served CMPS in many different capacities. They're amazing. They're not, they're lay botanists, but they know a lot of plants. They have learned a lot from our local area. I don't even know what your careers were before you retired, but they have just scoured the area and taken amazing photographs of native plants, and they've put out various sorts of CDs and interesting tools for people to learn native plants. And they put together interesting presentations. Gabby has come and given us a presentation about learning some plant families, some of the major plant families before, in a really informal, wonderful way that's really, great for newcomers to learning about plant families and traits. They also became very interested in the recovery after wildfire in wildlands. After a fire, and I forgot what year it was, in the 90s, in 1993, when the original Eden, the nature center, burned down, and since that time they've been following the recovery of vegetation, within these burn areas in the San Gabriel Mountains after each fire that's come along. And so they know a lot about the recovery, especially in Chaparral, I think, of the different plants, whether they resprout or come up by seed, and where they come up. So this should be a really interesting presentation with a lot of beautiful slides. I also wanted to mention that Gabby actually served on the state CMPS board for 3 years. That's quite a commitment to do that. Are you current? Are you on the current board? Yeah, they're current on the current board of the San Gabriel local, chapter. And I think she's been on and off as president in various capacities on that board over the years. And recently she organized our chapter council meeting, which was pretty amazing. The chapter did, and Gabby helped. It was a very team effort, as Gabby says. So I think we have enough people that are settled in the room now. Thank you all for coming. And I'm going to let Gabby and Cliff get started here.
Well, thank you, Arlie. I'm the Cliff part of the Cliff and Gabi. Arlie already said part of what I was going to say about our getting started in '93 and getting involved with documenting the burns that happen so often in the mountains here. The presentation that we have here today was one that we first gave in 2010, after the year after the station fire in 2009. And we gave it at the Station Fire Symposium sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service. And we've been modifying it and giving it multiple times after that, usually after a fire in the mountains. The latest fire, you of course know, is the Eaton fire in January 7th, 2025, that burned Eaton Canyon for the second time in 30 years. And unfortunately, in this case, it moved into the urban area and burned a tremendous part of Altadena, and unfortunately, lives were lost in that. So it brings us back to this presentation again. So Gabi and I have worked together on this presentation over the years, but the latest additions, alterations that she made for today, she did, and so she's going to do the talking up here now, and I'm going to sit down.
Thank you for that very nice introduction, Arlie, and welcome everybody. I love to see people here being excited about our amazing story of fire recovery. So the story is about how do we get from this desolate looking landscape, everything burned, the only color is gray and black, to this, a picture of rejuvenation and hope and recovery. So the reason why this question came up is like Arlie and Cliff mentioned, is the Eaton fire that happened in the Singable Mountains. And here you see the Singable Mountains. Actually, it's not all of the mountains. Let me see if I can get the cursor up here. Yes, okay. So the green part is Angeles National Forest. The mountains go actually further east here. Wrightwood is up here, and that's Bernardino National Forest is still, the eastern section is still in the Singaba Mountains. The area that burned in the Eaton fire is just a relatively small section on the southwestern end of the St. Gabriel Mountains. And most of the destruction, why people are so seriously and tragically affected, is the area that burned in the urban area. This fire recovery that I'm talking about is the recovery in the natural areas. I get used to this mouse because I use my mouse differently. Okay, so here is the area the area of the Eaton fire seen from a drone aerial view, and all this area is Altadena. And you could see it's burned, and the only thing that's standing are trees. But our story today is about the recovery of this area back here in the mountains. You could see it's gray or brown, and what hasn't burned is still that dark color. Remember, that was in January. At that time, we haven't had rain for 9 months. So all the vegetation that you see here looks pretty dry and was very dry. And you ask, how could they recover after that, long period of dry, without dry weather? And that's what we are going to figure out. I like to put the fire in context also with other fires, because our studies, observations have been in the St. Gabriel Mountains. So what we've learned applies to the St. Gabriel Mountains and the location, the plant communities that are in the St. Gabriel Mountains. We have had much larger fires. So the largest fires are in yellow, and those largest fires are all over 100,000 acres. The biggest one was the station fire in 160,000 acres. The other interesting part about this list, it's not a complete list, by all means. They are, it wouldn't fit on the screen and you would get bored. So, but there are 3 fires that I like to point out that weren't that big, but they were all in the same area, but they overlapped significantly. And those are the ones in Plaza Rita Canyon that affected Plaza Rita Canyon on the western end of the St. Gabriel Mountains, northwest. There have been like 2004, 2008, 2016 in pretty short succession. And that has an effect on recovery, and that's why I'm pointing it out. But our studies of these burned areas, and actually our studies of plants in the St. Gabriel Mountain, really started in 1993. Well, we started getting interested in plants before the fire, but when we started getting really interested to the point that we wanted to study them. That happened in 93 when the fire occurred, and we were taking a course to become naturalist docent at Eaton Canyon, and the building burned down, the canyon burned down, and we were trying to study the plants, and there weren't any plants, so we had to go out on our own into the mountains and find it, and that helped us study. So to put this in context, here is a picture of the whole St. Gabriel Mountains all along. The most recent large fire in the St. Gabriel was the Bobcat fire, and that's right smack in the middle. So Eden Canyon on this map is over here. The fire you see here, Pasadena, and here would be the Eden Canyon fire. There have been, like I said, many other fires. The area of Placerita Canyon that has repeatedly burned is around here, and there have been fires over here in the San Bernardino. Here's the line of the Bernardino National Forest, and everything east from that line is Bernardino's National Forest, and west is Angeles National Forest. And here is the area that burned in the station fire like 10 years earlier. And that was more on the western end, but you see this area here, there's a small area here, these things, that overlap the Bobcat fire too. Here's the St. Gabriel, here's the St. Gabriel River, the North Fork of the St. Gabriel River, and then the East Fork goes this way, North Fork goes this way, and West Fork goes this way. So the saving grace was that the eastern portion did not get burned. The eastern portion had been burned several times in the 10 years earlier, but not in the station fire. So that gave us an opportunity to observe. The other thing that is interesting to know, back when we started studying the burned areas, the Angeles National Forest wasn't as strict in their method of closing the forest after a fire totally. What they are doing now, starting with the station fire especially. Am I located correctly? Let's see. So we were able to observe where back in the early 2000s, whereas it has been increasingly difficult to go into the burned area in the first 2 years after the fire, when a lot of the interesting part of recovery happens after the later fires. So there have been other fires in Northern California that have been much bigger than the fire that we have in the St. Gabriel's, even bigger than the fires we had in Southern California in San Diego County. But the story that we are telling here is about recovery in the St. Gabriel Mountains as representative of Southern California. The landscape and plants are different in Northern California, and we are not covering that. What we are covering is the local fire recoveries, the plant adaptation, how the plants manage to recover, and the factors that impact recovery. So the recovery depends on the specific location, the weather, and other environmental conditions, and on the individual plant species. So we have the majority of the plant community in the Singaba Mountains. It's estimated around 3/4 of area in the Singaba Mountains is covered by chaparral. Is chaparral, and Arlie mentioned that. So a lot of what we've learned and what we've observed is about the chaparral, but we are looking at other plant communities as well. So chaparral is dominated, some people might know this, and I apologize if it's a repetition, but others might not, right? So it's dominated by dense, large shrubs that are too rigid to walk through and too tall to walk over. So they are very, very, unless you have a trail, of course, if you stay on the trail, yeah, you're good. But off trail, it's very difficult to get through there. It is in the Singabos, it's between 2,500 and 6,000 feet of elevation. I know you have chaparral in the San Bernardinos, but I don't know what the elevation numbers are here. About the same? Great, thank you. So chaparral, that plant community, is adapted to fires in intervals of 30 or more years. What that means is when there is a fire and the chaparral burns down to the ground, it will recover on its own within 30 years. Maybe in some areas a little earlier, but it's adapted. You don't have to worry. It will do fine. However, if the fires occur more frequently, then you have the danger that the area converts to weedy grassland. And this last item, fires in chaparral are crown fires. Since there's no understory, we mentioned that because when we get foresters in from the East Coast or from other parts of even Northern California, they talk about preventive burns, and preventive burns work in forests where you have an understory. In chaparral, you don't have an understory. And that is a point that we repeatedly have to remind so-called experts that come from a different part of the country and don't understand fires in Southern California, where we have a lot of chaparral. So recovery, like I said, it takes maybe 30 years. So the first year might look like this. You see the bare ground, you see some burned sticks, and then you see these patches of green. Well, there's one patch of green around the burned sticks and shrubs, I should say. And then there are some patches of green just on the bare ground. So those green vegetation comes from plants that are resprouters. Everything burned on the top, but the parts that are in the ground didn't burn, and they are able to resprout and take their energy from the roots. A year later, you still see those burned parts, but you see how high it is already and how colorful and how hopeful this picture is. So this is just after 1 year in spring. So the station fire was 2009. This is 2010, 1 year later. And then as the chaparral matures. This is taken in October. So of course, in October, things are getting dry. But what you see here is how the chaparral is filling in. I don't remember exactly what fire it was in that area, but by judging of the size of the shrubs and how much it has filled in, my guess is that is maybe 5 years after the fire. And I did want to say up here is the mature chaparral, and this is the recovering chaparral. You can tell when it's mature, when it's covered. You don't see any ground. Then it's fully recovered. So, and that's how the chaparral looks when it's mature. And again, it takes a while. Now, another plant community that we have a lot in the St. Gabriel Mountain is the coastal sage scrub. Coastal sage scrub consists of smaller shrubs and perennials with space between them. So you can walk in between them. It's not like the chaparral. And the shrubs are generally smaller, and they are interspersed with some larger shrubs. And some of the plants that grow in the chaparral might also grow in the coastal sage scrub and opposite, but just the dominating shrubs are different. So here is some mature, well, almost mature coastal sage scrub. It occurs in lower elevation and on south-facing slopes. So you might have chaparral on north-facing slopes and coastal sage scrub on south-facing slopes. And that plant community is also adapted to fire. And since the shrubs don't have to get that big, the adaptation, to fully recover takes less than in chaparral. So we put it at about 20 years. And the same thing applies if you have fires that are happening more often than you might face type conversion to weedy grassland. And again, in the fire recovery, just presents us with so many beautiful flowers and plants that you in other times do not see. And this is how the mature chaparral looks. Coastal sage scrub. Did I say chaparral? I must have been looking at the back of the picture because that is chaparral. And the front of the picture is coastal sage scrub. So then there is alluvial scrub, and we haven't heard anything talked about or literature here about alluvial fire recovery and alluvial scrub, maybe because it's not that common that we have fires there. And it's also considered a subset of coastal sage scrub. But I found it very interesting because the dominant plant of coastal sage scrub is scale broom. And this is taken not even a year, maybe 6 months after fire in at the mouth of the St. Gabriel River. And that area burned. It was full of this alluvial scrub. And the plant that just resprouted vigorously, quickly, enormously, quickly, was the scale broom. And I thought that was very comforting to see. And then you see some plants that you normally don't see. They only come up after fires, and we'll get more into that later. Here's that alluvial scrub plant community in the mountains. It usually is in lower elevation. This is at the West Fork. Well, Bear Canyon is a contributor. Some water comes down to the West Fork, and that's right there. And you see the dominant shrub, all those sticks that you saw in the previous picture. This shrub, when this shrub is mature, the scale broom, it looks like this. And this is a pretty big plant. Now we go to southern oak woodland. Now here, trees. How do the oaks survive? The oak bark is very thick, and most trees survive the fire. And we have seen that in that Altadena fire. There are a lot of trees that have survived the fire. They look burned, and the leaves are singed, and even the smaller branches are burned, but that does not mean that they are dead. So the new branches, the new growth can come from the roots and sprout on the unburned parts. So this is how the oak woodland looks when it's healthy. And then here you can see it's burned, but there's a lot of regrowth from down here at the base of the tree, and then from the bigger branches that didn't burn. You could see the branches here that did burn, and so the growth is, that part is dead, but whatever has not burned, has not penetrated the bark, will continue to grow. This is 2 years after a fire, and you can barely see the green along these branches. And what that tells us is it takes some time for the tree to recover. So the tree might look really burned and you think it's dead, but it isn't. It took a couple of seasons before you could see the regrowth. So this is we have seen that on other trees too, where the regrowth just didn't start until more than a season later. Another typical view of the recovering oak. Another plant community that we have, and you have a lot more of in the San Bernardinos, is the mixed conifer forest with yellow pine forest and mixed forest. And their fire recovery is very different. It takes a lot longer because it takes longer for the trees to recover. And different trees have different methods to recover. I guess the picture is missing on this one. The mixed conifer forest, it takes 50 to 100 years, and because it takes so long to grow. And here is a picture that kind of goes with the previous text. This is 11 years after the station fire, and the part that we have noticed, this is the station fire. We have observed the forest in the middle part of, like, where the Bobcat fire is more in Crystal Lake. In some areas that burned in the year 2002. So there's now 18 years after. And all through the years, we have observed and we have noticed that at higher elevation, the trees that can resprout have taken, especially the bighorn Douglas fir has taken up to 5 years or more before they actually resprouted. So pinyon juniper, well, I'd like to say just pinyon juniper woodlands without the oak, because we know the oak recovers, but the pinyon and juniper woodlands, they don't really, the junipers don't recover well. They have a thin bark and they will burn, and the seeds burn too. So there you have woodlands with junipers. The recovery doesn't look that encouraging. The larger pinyon pines, they can survive if the fire isn't too hot. But the younger trees, don't survive and must grow from seed. So here's a picture of the pinyon juniper woodlands in the northern part of the St. Gabriel's, where there traditionally hadn't been many fires because those plants are not that adapted to fire, and the severity of the landscape is of the vegetation is a lot more serious. So when recovery starts, it usually starts with the next rain, but like I showed in the earlier picture, for the plants that can resprout, it can start before the rain comes, and we have noticed that. And I said all of these items here before. The recovery also starts, varies by location and microclimate, because the conditions are different. How much water do they get? When do they get it? How steep it is? So that it all has an impact. So I talked about how the plants recover: resprouting, growing from seed, and some plants can do both. So we are now looking at individual plants and see, what do they do? So the resprouting, they could resprout from underground, from the underground roots, or even from bigger branches that the bark looks burned, but it didn't penetrate, and we are able to continue. We talk about obligate resprouters, that are plants that survive only by resprouting because their seeds burn in the fire. So you can only recover by seeds if your seeds are viable after the fire. So the bighorn Douglas fir does resprout. The canyon oak resprouts. Both of their seeds do not survive the fire, but the animals, when they can bring in the seeds, and they can survive, not large scale, but it does, it just takes longer for the seeds to come in and then for the plant to sprout. So there are some plants that do both. They resprout and they grow from seeds. And the encouraging part on that is that the species that are most dominant in chaparral and coastal sage scrub, they all seem to be these facultative resprouters. Just remember, they can do both. Their seeds don't burn, they can come up from seed, they do resprout from the unburned parts. So, and since they're the majority of the vegetation, yeah, they can do it. We don't have to despair. So the resprouting of perennials, bulb plants, shrubs, we have gone through that already, and trees. So it applies to perennial shrubs and trees, not, annuals, the resprouting. And this is how it looks. Everything is burned, it looks like, and here come the new sprouting branches up. This is from a scrub oak. Now, the part that is so amazing on the recovery is that we see so many flowers, annual flowers, that we don't see, in the mature plant communities, because the seeds only germinate, they need the effect of the fire to germinate. So we call them strict fire followers. They need, like the fire poppy, which, it's such a beautiful plant, and it's so rare because you only see it in the first year, maybe the second year a little bit after a fire. And you have to be able to go into those areas. So that's an annual. But even some shrubs need, seeds from some shrubs need to heat from the fire to germinate. Here's how we found the fire poppies in the Glendora Hills. Just amazing. And we have hiked all over the mountains, and the fire poppy, I mean, it goes out like those of you who are birders, you see a rare bird, it goes on bird alert, and everybody goes and sees it. That's the fire poppy for the botanists. Yeah, the fire poppies are here. So there's one more interesting thing about the plants, the seeds. Some need the fire, plants need the fire to germinate, but there are other plants that have actually two kind of seeds. One seed needs the fire, one type needs the fire to germinate, and the other type of seed doesn't need the fire, and they can do both. And those are the plants that you see in between fires, but after a fire, you see lots of them. And I kind of jumped ahead. These are more pictures of the ones that really need to see the fire, and you only see them after the fire. Those are poodle dog bush and the peak rush rose. They're shrubs, and you only find them after fires, but they take a few years to grow, so you don't see them. You don't notice them in the first year or the second year, but then the third, fourth, fifth, then they are all over. So here are some of the fire followers that they have the seed, they need the impact from the fire, but like the show of Pinstemon, you see it, in other years in between fires as well. But after the fire, oh, they are all over. You make fields of them. golden eardrops are fire follower and chaparral snapdragon. This is still talking about trees. The willows do the same thing. They can resprout and they can seed. So these are more impressions of, how we can recover. And the best medicine to this destruction that happened in the wildfires is going out and observing how they recover. To me, it's a message of hope and resilience. And it's a lot more than, the science. How do they recover? Well, the message is they recover. So go with it. Here are wild cucumber. That's a very small root of the tuber of the wild cucumber, and that is one of the first ones that comes up. Like one of the first pictures I showed you with the green area on the ground, that was all wild cucumber. Once they find the shrub, they grow over. They find some branches, they grow over, but they. I don't even know what wildflower that is. But it's there. It's yeah, grandiflora. Here, this is blue dicks. It's a bulb, and they come up after fire. They have the light. We don't need the fire to germinate seeds. They grow from a bulb. It's basically resprouting, but it's in their natural cycle. And it's just a field full of them. We see them all the time, but only on the edges and here and there. But after fire, they can be just really very prominent. Chaparral is frequent. We call them frequent fire follower. They are very abundant after in the first year. But you can find them also in between fires. And then the interesting part on the fire recovery is you see all these little plants come up, the rosettes, and to some people this might look like a mustard coming up, right? And we know we don't want the weeds. Well, beware. The plants look different when they are young, and no, this is yellow-throated Phacelia that comes up only after fire. Then another fire follower, but it's a shrub, is the bush poppy. Stinging lupin, that could have been also stinging lupin. We have had lots of stinging lupin in the along the San Gabriel River foothills. And here is another example of the wild cucumber that comes up, and then it finds tree and then it climbs up. Another one that we only have seen after fires is the white snapdragon. It's just a gorgeous plant, and it's kind of one of the ones that you say, hey, I found a white snapdragon. They're so rare in other times. We have bishop's lotus, that is a fire follower. White pin cushion. They also are more in the desert areas of the mountains, or not dry areas. And Chia is one that you see very often. Southern sun cups, they grow bigger. It's not only that there are more of them, but I guess with the nutrients from the ashes, they can grow really, really big. Popcorn flower, we have fields of popcorn flower. So here you see the southern sun cups that really look, double as big as we normally see them. The scarlet larkspur, we see them in between fires, but after the fire, they're like double or triple as large. They're just, and lots and lots of them. Look at this. This looks like, planted the garden, worked really hard on it. Well, the fire will do that. We have whispering bells, is this area here. Golden stars is this area and there, and then you see the blue dicks and Facilia in the foreground. Whispering bells is a very strict fire follower. It needs the heat, so you only see it after fires, the first 2 years. Golden star, popcorn flower. You've seen hillsides of it. Hillside, and it's so interesting. You see one hillside all with popcorn flower, and the next hillside with stinging lupin, and sometimes you see patches. And the station fire burned in areas that hadn't been burned for 100 years, and some areas had repeatedly burned. But to realize that these seeds had to be in the ground for 100 years and they are still viable. We go to the nursery and we buy seeds and we think, oh, next year the seed is old. Well, not in the chaparral and the coastal sage scrub. The seeds last. That's how they recover, with the seeds in the seed bank, in the ground. Larkspur, gorgeous larkspur. Never seen larkspur like that outside of after a fire area. Caterpillar Facilia, we have lots of Facilias in our mountains, but the Facilia secretaria is the one that is much more prominent after fire. And it's one of the ones that part of this, some seeds need the charred wood to germinate, but other seeds, work just fine. And it's an annual herb. So plenty of larkspur. We never could figure out what species that was. So in here you can see, close up, there are the flowers, but then you see patches. This is white. This is from popcorn flower. Could be from popcorn flower. It could be from the yellow-throated Facilia. So there are different species that are out there, and they just build those patches of plants, and they give the first and second year growth of those annuals, make it possible for give them some shade and protection for the seeds that need more time to grow. Splendid Gilia, oh, just gorgeous. Normally we find it little, that big. After a fire, 5 foot tall. Large flowered Facilia, a strict fire follower, and so gorgeous. It was one of the first plants that we learned after the 93 fire, and then we've never seen it again. And it took us, years until we were studying really how the plants recover that we figured out, oh, it's one of those strict fire followers that need the fire, and that's why we hadn't seen it again. This is how these slopes just dazzle us. Even with low growing lotus, and you see one of the dangers here. There's a castor bean, and when the fires happen too often in too close interval, then the weeds will move in. Talked about these, how I'm doing with my time. Yellow pin cushions. So now, after the first and the first year with all the annuals and the ground cover of the resprouting wild cucumber, the shrubs are beginning to fill in a little more. And what you see here, the yellow, is deerweed. Deerweed is one of the shrubs that has the two kinds of seeds. They can resprout. They can grow from seed in in between fire. They don't need the fire to germinate, but then they have also the seeds that do need the impact from the fire. And in our foothills, we have seen, I think I will have a picture of that, where we have nothing but deerweed, yellow hills, the orange hills. This is an area where they had a pine plantation that was planted. It wasn't native pines. And but even some of these, burned totally, but then you could see right here, there is regrowth along the main trunk. So the branches burn, but it's coming back up on, the vegetation is coming back up on the main trunk. And in the foreground is the showy penstemon. More showy penstemon, which is just beautiful fire follower. Now here is the foreground is the peak rush rose that I said is a strict fire follower. They need it's a shrub that needs the fire impact for the seeds to germinate, and you only find it after fire, but it's a shrub, so it lasts for a few years. And then you have manzanita here. There are some manzanitas that can resprout and some cannot. So it depends on the particular species. Here's the peak rush rose that I was talking about. And this is a close-up. It's a tiny, it looks nice and big here, but it's only around less than an inch across, maybe half an inch across. These are pseudonephalium everlastings mixed in with deerweed. But you could see they're growing now. They're covering the base of those skeletons. And but you see, the vegetation gets bigger, and we make sure that the other plants that take more time have some protection. And this is how it looked in the third year. I think these are Clarkias over here. And, I'm not sure what these yellow ones are. Golden eardrops. That's a shrub, only comes up after fire. You don't see it otherwise. So that's what you miss if you don't go out there after a fire. Pardon me? Oh, this one? I don't know. I can't tell. No, it could be the Areophilum. Yes, I think that's it. Yeah, because this one looks like that and that one looks like Areophilum. Yeah. Thank you. And here's what I was talking about, the deerweed. All these hills, this orange, this is deerweed. And it's just gorgeous. And we saw this, 3 years after the fire. And we haven't seen this display of color since. It's really a beautiful experience to go out and see how nature deals with fire. And I told the story about these two types of seeds already. And here's more about, you can see I've been impressed with that. So you get to see more pictures of it. Now, this is a very interesting shrub that is a strict fire follower. And I remember after the station fire, people would ask us, what is this plant? I've been hiking in the St. Gabriel's for 20 years and I've never seen this plant. And that was when the poodle dog bush came up, before it was flowering. It has these very, very distinctive leaves. And yeah, it was the poodle dog bush. Now, we got so enamored with that poodle dog bush because it is gorgeous. It is beautiful. I took many, many pictures. And then all of a sudden we learned, oh, don't touch it. Now, we are one of the lucky ones. We never got a rash, but we heard of people that had to go to the hospital because of their reaction to that plant. So do not go, do not touch it, just enjoy it. Maybe with some binoculars, because they have many, many butterflies and insects and native bees. And it's a great food plant for our pollinators. Back in those times, it used to be called Turricula. Now it's called Eridictium prairieae. So one of the ones that have name changes. The manzanita, this particular manzanita, the St. Gabriel Mountains manzanita it's Arctostaphylum glandulosa gabrielensis. This one can resprout and grow from seed, so that has a good chance of growing back to the mature plant communities that it is in. So that's how that's how it looked before the fire with chaparral and many chaparral. This is on the western end, which is not so as high as the eastern end of the St. Gabriel's. And then this is how that area looked, the same area that I just showed you here before the fire. Is how it was after the fire. But you see, if you look closely, you see already recovery. And the yucca is one of the ones that really stick out when they burn. Then all of a sudden you see their corm. You see that part of the plant that is usually covered up with the leaves, and it has really interesting shapes. And they might flower out of season after a fire. We really do their thing. One of the monkey flowers that's a frequent fire follower. This white hillside is yellow-throated Phacelia. A strict fire follower. This is one of the ones where the seeds have been in there for many decades. Yellow-throated Phacelia. So overall, it looks white in a field, but if you look closely, it's a tiny flower. It has this yellow throat. Lupin again. Now this is 8 years after the fire. You can still see some dry, some burned shrubs, but overall it's filling in. You know, the manzanita, this is the manzanita, has grown to almost shrub size. But it's not fully recovered because you could see still empty spaces. So it's still in recovery. Now, when you go to those areas where they had fires repeatedly, then you're beginning to see that there are challenges there. You see all these green areas that are the bright green, not the darker green like here. This one is darker green, but this one is lighter green. So the lighter green is the weedy grasses. So this appears to be where the fires have been too often and the grasses have just taken over. But we still have places where recovery is still going on. As you can see here, the blue dicks. This is Accordia. And here are some pictures from Lighted Creek, which is just gorgeous in their recovery. Pretty much untouched from weeds, which is great. Flannel bush, which is also we have in the northern slopes of the St. Gabriel's. You have it in your mountains too. More of the fire poppy. And the other thing that we have observed is that the plants that we usually see, but after fire, we called it Cliff invented. No, I don't know if he invented it, but he coined the phrase fire gigantism. Thank you. You see this Humboldt lily? I'm like 5 feet, some inches, few inches, not very many. It's going down. But this is almost double as me. And I'm standing right next to it. It's not a distortion. It was just huge. A pea plant is, can do both resprout and reseed. Nephilim is, oh, sorry, pseudonephilium, the everlasting, is a, frequent fire follower. See that a lot. Both of them, both species of pseudonephilium. So the chaparral vegetation is adapted to fire and regenerates on its own. And coastal sage scrub as well. The wooded areas, I did talk about the oak, and now the pines are a little bit different. The pines, coulter pine must grow from seed, and the heat of the fire opens the cone. Sometimes the cones stay on the tree. Sometimes they fall down. We see them on the ground too. But anyways, they need for the seeds to germinate. They need the effect of the fire. The bighorn Douglas fir, looking really weird because they were resprouting after the fire. We have documented, not we, but in the literature, we have read that there are bighorn Douglas fir that have lived 700 years. So they definitely have survived major fires because they can resprout. However, if the fires are too hot and they burn down, the seeds are burned down too, and you have to bring in the seeds somehow, natural means or human means. The Jeffrey pine has a thick bark, kind of like the oak. And low and moderate fires usually don't kill mature trees. But it must grow from seeds if they do. So, so the yellow pine forest, if you go into the yellow pine forest there, I can see that you would apply preventive burns, but not in the chaparral, not in coastal sage scrub. In the high country, I was talking about the trees, but we have shrubs in the high country too. In the manzanitas, some of them resprout and do just fine after fires, as well as the chinkapin. We have a lot of chinkapin in our mountains, and they do resprout. So, and that is good that they resprout because then they provide the shade to the trees that have to grow from seed. And this is a Davidson lotus. We figure it's Davidson lotus. I won't tell you with 100% certainty, but that covered the forest floor after the Williamson fire that was along the North Fork of the St. Gabriel's and up to Crystal Lake. It was just amazing. As a fire follower, the lotus that grew. And here you can see there is recovery. It's just, it goes through kind of a vegetation stages, low growing shrubs, and then the bigger shrubs, and then the trees. So when we talk about recovery taking 50 years, it doesn't mean that it looks desolate for 50 years. It means that the trees haven't grown to their original size until 50 years or 100 years. There are other vegetation that grows there and provides habitat. It doesn't, if we say recovery takes that long, it doesn't mean that there is not some kind of recovery that provides benefit and an ecosystem for the animals that live there. It just means you wouldn't have the same look of those mature trees until that time. This is at the Cienega in the San Gabriel Mountains. And you could see 18 years later, you could see these trees. They are beginning, these are, I think, cedars that are, growing. Over here, this looks like a coulter. But you had these beautiful mountain meadows with the spectacular wildflowers. And there was, you had the trees that burned, but they were other vegetation that really had the functions of regeneration and providing habitat to the animals. The bighorn Douglas fir that took almost a decade to re-sprout. Now, I call this obstacles to recovery. I should say maybe impacts or challenges to recovery. One that is most known is erosion. And it depends on the vegetation that is there. It depends on the rainfall. We know that the terrain, how steep a slope is, and what kind of soil we have. So it varies. It's very location specific, what we have. In the larger sense, when you're in the mountains and you have erosion, yes, you have erosion, but the plants will come back. It becomes a problem when you, like with the wildfire, when you have structures, when you have humans living there, and where the mud flow, can be a danger to life and property. These are some examples of how erosion looks like. And again, you wouldn't get these pictures in the last 10 years because the Forest Service did not allow, the Forest Service closed the forest, and they wouldn't allow hikers to go into these eroded areas. That's why those pictures are old. That's the same area, Smith Saddle. I don't know if you guys know those areas. This is near Placerita Canyon, East Walker Ranch. You could see the erosion from far. And yes, it has an impact. It's, you don't see as much green here as you see just neighboring. But it will come back. Whereas over here, that looks like a lot of the grasses, grasses. Now, another very, very big negative impact are invasive plants. And that happened much more intense in the urban interface. So where the weeds are, or any place where you have roads and trails, because vehicles and boots carry seeds, carry those invasive seeds. And they can take over. And it's one of the biggest threats to recovery in your urban wildland interface. Castor bean. Castor bean loves this place. And we have seen castor bean come in not only after fires, but also after floods. You know, any kind of disturbance, the castor bean loves disturb their areas and get them when they are young. Here you could see we have our fire follower, the stinging lupin, which has plenty of seeds in the ground, but it is crowded out by the castor bean. So you have here the stinging lupin, here is a little bit of caterpillar Facilia. Here's some whispering bells, so all our typical fire followers, but they're covered up by the castor bean. Wild Canterbury bells, very, very prolific after fire, covered up by invasive grasses, the brome. Then the other challenge to recovery is the fire frequency, but I did cover that in my previous comments. And this is just to show you another example where this is the area, like in the middle of the San Gabriel Mountains, the San Gabriel River comes down here. It has the East Fork goes this way, the West Fork goes this way, the North Fork goes up. And in these areas, Highway 39 goes up there. So wherever you have roads and trails, that's where fire ignites, and that's where weeds are carried in. So those two dangerous conditions are related to roads. So if you want to preserve an area, you want to minimize human connection. Now, of course, we want to go out in the trails, we want to watch, right? But it's just something to be aware of and to concentrate and take preventive actions like clean our boots and let the Forest Service disinfect the tires of the heavy equipment when they build outhouses and other stuff. Or when they just want to widen the road, you know. They widen the road and they not only take out the native vegetation, but then they have another 20, 50 feet of weed infestation that's introduced. So these are areas that burn several times quickly. Very close. So these are examples of where the fire burned several times. This area is recovering well. This area has burned more than once, you know, in the frequent interval, and so it looks bad. So it's an issue. This was also to show you just the overlapping areas with the station fire and the Bobcat fire, and the recovery is delayed or prevented, marred with weeds in those areas that had the fire more frequently. Examples that what I've talked about. So this is a summary of related to the plant communities and how long they take to recover. And I did speak about what I mean with recover, to put it back to their original vegetation type. Doesn't mean that there is not a recovery. And the last thing is, what can we do for recovery? We get that question all the time. And it's surprising, people just can't believe when I say, well, let nature do its thing. It will recover by itself. And that applies to chaparral, coastal sage scrub, removal scrub. It might not apply completely to the higher elevation where, and it definitely doesn't apply to the desert where the plants are not adapted to fire because there were no fires. Now we have fires in the desert because of the weedy grasses that have been introduced, and the fire carries from plant to plant. So the best thing we can do is control the weeds. Before the fire, anytime you control the weeds, it works as a fire prevention. And when you do have a fire, then after the fire, the weeds at kind of a pioneer plant, they try to get out there, and we can support the native regeneration by just pulling the weeds. So in that, so the main question, how do we support fire? We let nature take its place. And that is it, and I'm open for questions.
Read the questions that are online. So the first question, which I did address somewhat myself, is, can oak woodland benefit from preventive burns of the excess understory? And then I said, not really.
Thank you. I would have said the same thing.
Yeah, most of it says, there isn't much excess understory, and the oaks
And it
are
doesn't
related
need, yeah,
to the-
it doesn't do anything good. It just,
Does oak woodland benefit from preventive burns of excess understory?
okay. So yeah, the Zoom audience wouldn't have heard that question. Does would oak woodland benefit from prescribed burns? And our answer is not really, it's not necessary. The oaks will recover, and the oaks naturally, especially the coast live oak, the canopy goes all the way to the ground if you leave it alone. You see coast live oak in parks, and they trim them up. But that's done by the maintenance. If you let the coast live oak grow by its own, it looks like a huge half moon. You know, it's just the outer branches, the outer leaves go all the way to the ground. It's as wide as tall. So no, please don't do prescribed burns in oak woodland.
So then question, number two, is, has there been progress in land management techniques with prescribed burns in a timely manner to balance the regrowth of chaparral, crystal sage scrub species with the control of wildfire fuels? So prescribed burns you're on.
Okay, I mentioned briefly that while prescribed burns works in forests that have a high canopy and too much understory that's dry. That's where prescribed burns is valuable. The chaparral and coastal sage scrub, all the growing happens in the lower, above, up to 5-6 feet on the ground. That's all where the vegetation is. If you do a prescribed burn in chaparral or coastal sage scrub, you are basically creating a wildfire. And you are basically killing the adaptation capability of the plants that are there. And what is going to happen is, like I said, in the fire intervals, you are creating short fire intervals, which then produces conversion to grassland, not native grassland, but weedy grassland, which dry out much faster than native vegetation and create fuel that ignites quicker and carries the fire much faster than the natural vegetation would. I don't know, did this answer it?
Yeah, I did answer pretty much the same, that CMPS for our fire policy doesn't recommend this not burning in Southern California. But
I think that's really weird as well. Yeah, so the studies in Southern California, because you know about fire mentioned that we have pretty high fire resilience and the Southern California mountains, whereas in some areas in the north, it's a whole different story. But people keep extrapolating maybe California to Southern California, which is sort of an institution.
Yeah, I like to repeat what Artie was saying, so the Zoom audience can hear that too. Artie was saying that what I said in the beginning too, in Northern California has different vegetation conditions, different, there are forests. The Angeles National Forest is not a forest, it's chaparral. So yeah, we have way in the mountains, high up in the mountains, we have some forest, but down here where the urban wildland interface, where fires, where we want to prevent fire so it doesn't go into our homes, that's where people want to do something. And the best thing to do you don't get harmed in your homes is fireproof your home. It's not the vegetation that brings the fire to you. It's the flammable material that you use in your home. And you've seen that in that picture of the Altadena. It's the homes that burned and they were surrounded by vegetation that didn't burn, or that burned a little bit, but it didn't carry the fire. Yeah. Yeah. There's a question here. Yes.
Well, I wanted to say.
No, this, yeah, so we have a contribution from, what's her name? Leaf, who has worked with native bees. And his observation in the studies he has done has shown that there has been an increase in native bees and bumblebees after a fire. And he leads it back to the diversity that comes up of plants after the fire. And we have seen there are certain species that come up only after fire. And yeah, it's, you know, it's interesting to see how it's not only the plants that survive, the seeds that survive for decades, but somehow, you know, that ecosystem, it's a whole ecosystem. It's is impacted, positively impacted.
I have, a question and comment that I want to make about the question. And, then I'm gonna start with the comment, which is that, the question is about fire intensity and our fires burning so hot that we kill all the seeds. And I have two comments about that, and one is, a lot of that is being said by people who are not touched. They're mostly, you know, your TV talker. There is some science, people are working on it, but there's not like this real definition on that I understand. The other thing is, fires, the seeds, do better in fire if they are dry. Prescribed burns happen when seeds are wet. So prescribed burns could limit whether to germinate at all or whether they are filled.
Would you like to see that up here?
The question is,
It's going,
Yeah.
go ahead.
the question is, Linda Richards asked if that we're hearing a lot about whether or not higher intensity fires are reducing germination or are going to kill all the seeds, basically. And I will say that I have looked for literature around this. I haven't found much. There's some, yeah. Mhm. Mhm.
So there are a bunch of studies. I wouldn't go too far in
Right.
answering the details of this. right
Yeah.
now.
It's so,
Quite
but
tough.
it's, yeah, so it's much more nuanced, but what we hear from presenters, news presenters and in print is, oh my God, the fires are all gonna be hotter and all the seeds will be killed. And so that's that question is much more nuanced, and every fire has variable intensity. So every fire isn't kill everything everywhere. And so
With the mosaic
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
intensity,
Yeah, there was one.
different recoveries in those different intensity areas.
So Arlie says there's a mosaic of intensities, and so different recovery in different intensity areas. And the other thing is, I want to relate that back to seed survival, and seed survival in fires is related to the moisture content of the seeds. So when there's less moisture in the seeds, they're more likely to survive fires, and that's well studied. So prescribed burns happen when seeds are not dry. usually in a wetter, like, damp, moist time of year, so that the prescribed fire doesn't escape. So that's another concern about prescribed fire is when they happen, are they really helping the land?
Yeah, and be sure to say that you're talking about Southern California.
Yes.
Yeah.
Southern California.
And, yeah, and, yeah, we, again, I said that in the very beginning, and I want to reiterate that we are talking here in this presentation about mainly chaparral and coastal sage scrub. We recognize that there are other areas and other principles that apply to fire prevention. And remember, this talk is about fire recovery. It's not about fire prevention. But of course, we are human. This is which just comes up. It's we want to recover from the impact of the fire. In this particular last fire, the impact has been just really, really dramatic for a lot of people. And I didn't lose my home, and I still feel traumatized. I didn't live in the evacuation area, and I still feel traumatized. So I don't want to downplay the impact this fire had, but at the same time, I want to say the impact is because it burned so many homes. The impact on the wildlands is manageable. It's within the realm of the recovery. I know recovery is coming. I've experienced it before. I haven't experienced 9,000 homes being destroyed, so this is recovery in the wildlands. There is hope, and we can understand how the plants in the chaparral, in the coastal sage scrub, they have developed and they can withstand it. And when we mess with them, then we'll have more problems. Come here.
So for the details, about, how one might manage our various, wildlands in this region and, throughout California, look forward to the February 2026 CMPS conference, which will be held in Riverside at the Riverside Convention Center. I am sure we will have, probably a plenary speaker on the topic, and we will probably have sessions where people could really learn a lot, from presenters that actually study lots of these different aspects, related to fire, both fire recovery and whether we should be restricting fire to some areas and modifying fuels and where. So that's a very complicated topic. There are a lot of experts in the field, many of them don't agree with each other, but come to the conference. I'm sure you'll learn a lot. And then
Okay, is that, do we have any more questions, or do we?
Don't have any more online. We have a couple thank yous and excellent presentation.
Oh, thank you. Okay, thank you for your attention.